Most readers I know buy way more books than they can read. And if I'm honest, I do this too. For a long time, I think that felt like a failure, like a lack of discipline, or focus, or follow through. But recently, I came across an idea that completely changed how I think about it. My sister shared this quote with me that goes like this: "Think not of books you've bought as a to-be-read pile. Instead, think of your bookcase as a wine cellar. You collect books to be read at the right time, the right place, and the right mood." Luke van Donkersgade. And that immediately rang true with me. Books are not something that is just about what book you're reading. It can be about when. Because I don't think all books are meant to be read immediately. Some books are meant to wait. And this isn't because we're avoiding them. It's because we're not quite ready to be the right person to read them yet. So today I want to talk about 6 books that have been on my shelf for varying amounts of time and that I'm really excited, really looking forward to reading, but I'm saving them for the right time. So first up here, this is one I've been very consciously saving for a quiet season. I've read some other works. I've read some of Virginia Woolf's short stories and her flash fictions. A Haunted House in particular is one that I remember very fondly, and I found them very compelling. But I'm really waiting for a season of stillness before I read To the Lighthouse for the first time. Now, there's something about the way Virginia Woolf writes, how interior it is, how attentive to these small shifts in perception she is, shifts that most of us would not notice, that would be imperceptible to most of us, but which she notices with fastidious attention to detail. And the other thing for me about this is that a lot of people say this is their favorite work of hers. So I take all of those recommendations very seriously, and I want to savor this read. But I think this is also, this is also a book that, it's the kind of book I can't read halfway. Obviously, I haven't attempted it yet, but it just seems like one that I can't just read and get distracted in the middle of. I can't read it in fragments. I need to be able to sit down and read the whole thing. So for me, this is a book that I'm saving for a quieter stretch of life, not just externally, but also internally, when I feel a little less rushed overall, a little more attentive, and I look forward to seeing and selecting and savoring To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Now, the second book here I've had on my shelf for quite some time. This one's probably been there for half a decade at least. And knowing the author, I know this will transport me to a very specific time and place. That's wonderful, and I've enjoyed going to this time and place before, but I really need to be in the right mood for it because it's very specific. And this is The Beautiful and the Damned by Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald. And it's perhaps the ultimate, the ultimate book that I would read when I'm in the right mood. I'm looking forward to when I'm in the right mood kind of book, if that makes sense. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading and rereading Fitzgerald, both his long fiction and his short fiction. There's just something about the way that he writes that I find very compelling and extremely unique. I think that regardless of whether you like Fitzgerald or not, you have to admit he's got a distinctive style. And I know going into this, I'm not expecting another, Gatsby, but I am interested to see what happens in The Beautiful and Damned. Reading the back of this even before when I was looking through all these books, I can see that it has a very specific ambiance, narrative, perspective. So I know it's going to require the right frame of mood in order to start this one. Like, I wouldn't just pick this up randomly for a good read or an adventure. I'm waiting for the call to go back to the jazz age before I start this one. And knowing Fitzgerald, it's not just the glamour, it's also the disillusionment underneath it that is attractive about his writing, because Fitzgerald's always doing both. I think I want to meet this book in a slightly reflective mood, maybe nostalgic, tiny bit cynical, perhaps. But it's another one I very much look forward to reading. Now, the third one here, it's a bit heftier than the first two, and I'm awaiting this one with great curiosity. Honestly, as things stand today, keeping in mind the fluctuations of mood, this is probably the one I'm second most excited about reading right now. This book is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And honestly, it feels crazy that I've never read this one, but it's been on my shelf for a while. I know it's a much talked about classic, but I really want to go into reading this without too many expectations, as I think that's the best way to go into a book if you really want to enjoy it, get a lot out of it. There are some interesting biographical details about Ralph Ellison that really interest me and make me curious about what this book will be about and how the tone and the character will be depicted. Ellison had a former affiliation with the Communist Party in America and became very disillusioned with it after World War II, as so many did. And so The Invisible Man was written in part out of that disillusionment, which makes me really interested to see how it compares to something like Darkness at Noon by Arthur Koestler, for example. So there's an intellectual curiosity with this book, but I also don't want to over-prepare. The way I see it, books like this deserve not just to be read with presuppositions, although of course we'll bring our knowledge into every book that we read, but I believe they deserve more to be met as honestly as possible. So I'm looking forward to meeting this book in person sometime in the hopefully not too distant future. So book 3 here, Invisible Man. Now the fourth book is a classic by Toni Morrison, and I already know a good deal about the plot and what it's about, and I've never sat down to read Beloved, even though I've heard so much about it. With Toni Morrison, I decided to take a slightly different approach. For some reason, I don't know, partly due to research and into her work, I just decided to start with The Bluest Eye, which is an excellent book for anyone who hasn't read it. I found it very impactful, and I definitely need to talk about it one of these days. But I started there, and then I kind of worked my way through some of her shorter works, like Recitatif, for example. But because Beloved is much beloved, it's one of those books that's highly recommended, but it's also very heavy, right? I don't think this is a book that I want to just work through because I feel an obligation. So I'm not avoiding it because I haven't been in the mood to read Toni Morrison novels, but because I'm preparing for this particular story, which I know a good deal about. I want to build up to it as a reader and as a person. And then when I finally read it, I want to be able to give it the full attention that it deserves. Because books like this, they ask something of you. I guess I just haven't been ready to give that yet with this one. So, book 4, Beloved by Toni Morrison. The next one here feels like a major gap for me. I guess I'm waiting for the right headspace, and that's the reason this one has stayed on the shelf, and I'm excited to read it, but there's a part of me that does feel, I want to get this one read sooner rather than later, so the pressure that exists when we buy books and we want to read, I still feel that. This exists with me. This new philosophy, this new way of looking at it is not totally complete yet. I'm still working my way through. And this book is 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez, or Cien Años de Soledad in Spanish. Now, I guess this feels like a gap because Márquez is obviously such a major figure in Latin American literature, and in particular in magical realism. In that field, he's like one of the godfathers of it. And I did actually start this book. I think I got like a few pages in, not one chapter in, I think. I was traveling at the time, and I just wasn't in the right, it wasn't the right time. I wasn't in the right headspace for it. Now, I also have this in the original Spanish, and Márquez is known to use a very broad, rich, sophisticated vocabulary, so it's definitely not an easy book to read, particularly in one's non-native language. It also contains some very specific kind of Colombian dialect-specific words, which can add friction to the reading experience if you're not in the right mindset for that. And this regional variation exists much more in Spanish than it does in English, so it's hard to kind of communicate if you're not familiar with the landscape of Spanish literature. But most people will probably be reading this in English if they do decide to read it. I think at the end of the day, being in the right mindset matters more than we admit. Because no book is hard or easy if we're in the right mindset, right? This just feels like a book that you don't just read, you have to enter. I think that's why, because it's this whole confusing, unfamiliar, not quite like our world, but kind of type world. And truthfully, even though I feel the gap, I don't want to rush it, right? I want to read this in a good state, not a distracted state, and come away thinking, what did I just read? I want to actually experience the world Márquez creates. So for now, this stays on the shelf, and its time will come, hopefully very soon. Now, finally, number 6 here, and this is the one that I'm far and away most excited to read, even though I don't yet have a set date to start reading it. This is Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. This one is interesting because in some ways I've already experienced it. I listened to a short BBC, I think it was radio drama version of it years ago, and I found the story super compelling. Of course, it's not the same as reading the original, which is why I'm adding this on the list today. But since then, I've read quite a bit about Grossman and his life, his work, the context in which he was writing, which is absolutely fascinating. He was obviously a survivor of the Second World War, a Jewish man, so living in a world, with extremely complicated world, the bloodlands, as Timothy Snyder called it. You had the Nazis and the communists and everything going on. I'm also really interested to read Stalingrad at some point, which is another one of his works that just looks extremely compelling. But he's one of those writers that writers I admire are constantly recommending. So there's already a lot of investment in my mind in the quality of this book, and the excitement that I have reading it stems largely from all these recommendations, everything I've read, and the fact that I've experienced a little bit of the story in the radio drama. Now, this is a long one and a Russian one, and I'm under no illusions that this is going to be a breeze. There'll be a lot of history and complex casts of characters, and honestly, this is one that I think would be a lot of fun to unpack in a book club. But however I read it, it won't be a casual reading experience. It's something that is closer to a major life commitment, I think. So I'm still waiting for the right time to sit down and read this beautiful book properly. So those are 6 books on my shelf that I am not rushing, and I think this way of thinking about reading has been really helpful for me because it removes that sense of guilt, which is not only unhelpful but often untrue, just overall. So that sense of that you're somehow behind, maybe buying more books than we read, is not actually a failure of discipline. Maybe it's a recognition that reading isn't just about time, it's about timing. And a good library isn't just a list of obligations of to-be-reads that I have to read. It's a collection of future reads that I'm excited to one day embark upon. So I'd be curious, do you have a book that you're waiting to read or saving for a special moment because you want to read it at the right time in your life? Comment below and like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. God bless.